Good morning, first graders. Today we are on page 29 of your student journal, page 29. And our objective today says, today I will compare the length of two objects by using a third object and make an indirect comparison. This is our big word or phrase today, indirect comparison. Okay, so an indirect comparison, boys and girls, is a comparison, which means you're going to compare two things, but you're going to compare them not by looking at them together, but by looking at them with other objects. Okay, so you're going to see me do some of these. These are a little tricky, these indirect comparisons. So we're going to have to follow our steps closely today, okay? All right, let's look at our vocabulary. They've given us three objects. We see a marker, a hammer, and an arrow. Okay, now let's look at what they did. They said the marker is shorter than the hammer. So they compared the marker to the hammer. And that's true, the marker is shorter than the hammer. That's their first statement. Then they said the hammer is shorter than the arrow. So then they compared the hammer and the arrow. So the hammer is shorter than the arrow. Okay, so they compared those two and those two. The final statement says, therefore, the marker is shorter than the arrow. So at the very end, they compared this and this. So they compared those two using something called a therefore statement. Okay, so let's look at our steps. It says we're going to first number the objects from shortest to longest. Compare the first object to the second object. So say they compared the first one to the hammer, so marker to hammer, first to second. Then compare the second object to the third. So they compared the hammer to the arrow, or the second object to the third object. And then they indirectly compared these two. They indirectly compared those two using a therefore statement. Okay, so friends, I'm going to show you this. All right, here's my first problem. Okay, my first problem has three objects to compare. I see a paper clip, a key, and a spoon. Okay, and it says that I can number them from shortest to longest. Okay, so I could label them, but I'm not going to do that because some of my questions might be asking about something longer. So what I'm going to first do is I'm going to read this. It says, the blank is shorter than the key. So here's my key, and here's all my objects lined up. Which object is the blank is shorter than the key, friends? Is the spoon shorter than the key, or is the paper clip shorter than the key? Could we say it's the paper clip, right? So I'm going to read them to fill in the blanks. Okay, let's read my next one because they wanted shorter. Okay, my next question says, the key is shorter than the what? What is the key shorter than? Is the key shorter than the paper clip, or is the key shorter than the spoon? Ooh, it's the spoon, right, boys and girls? Okay, so I compared the first object to the second and the second object to the third. So what I can now compare is, what have I compared? I compared the paper clip and the key together, paper clip and key, and then I compared the key and the spoon together, right? But what didn't I compare? I didn't compare these. I didn't compare the paper clip to the spoon. So what can I say? Therefore, the blank is shorter than the blank. Which one's shorter? Isn't it the paper clip? So therefore the paper clip is shorter than the spoon. Okay, so I'm kind of just filling in the blanks, boys and girls, based on what my question says. Okay, let's look at my next one. Okay, here's my next one. Okay, now the next one, they're talking all about, I'm going to see the word longer, so I'm going to have to pay a little bit attention. Okay, ready? My first question says, well, I first have a spoon, a knife, and a fork, and it says, the blank is longer than the fork. Ooh, I'm going to underline that word longer. See, my objects are lined up, and here's where they are. So they want the blank is longer than the fork. What's longer than the fork? Is the spoon longer than the fork? No. Is the knife longer than the fork? Yes. So I'm going to write that. So the knife is longer than the fork. So they compared the knife and the fork together, right? That's what I'm going to write that line to show. Okay, let's read my next one. The fork is longer than the what? What's the fork longer than? Is the fork longer than the spoon or the knife, boys and girls? It's the spoon, right? So they compare, what did they compare now? The fork and the spoon. So they compared those. What haven't they compared yet? What didn't they compare? They did those two together and those two together. Ooh, they didn't compare these two together, huh? Those two they didn't compare, the spoon and the knife. Let's read this. Therefore, the blank is longer than the blank. Well, if the word says longer, which one should go there? Should I say, therefore, the knife is longer than the spoon? Or therefore, the spoon is longer than the knife? Ooh, I think we should say, therefore, the knife is longer than the spoon. Because if I compare these two, isn't the knife longer? So boys and girls, when you write these, you just have to make sure everything's being compared. So that's why I like to draw the little lines to connect them. Let's try some of these together. We're on page 30. Our first problem's on page 30. And let's look at our objects we're going to compare. Okay, we're going to compare a marker, an arrow, and a hammer. Okay, and let's read our questions that we have to fill in the blank. It says, the blank is shorter than the arrow. Okay, I want everyone to underline the word shorter. Okay, let's look at our objects. Ready? See how they're lined up? And then this is where we're going to compare them. So it says the blank is shorter than the arrow. So here's the arrow. Which one of these is shorter than the arrow? Is the marker shorter than the arrow or the hammer? Ooh, friends, I hope you said the marker is shorter than the arrow. So let's write marker there. So the marker is shorter than the arrow. So what did we just compare? Didn't we compare the marker and the arrow? Let's put a line there saying we just compared those two. Okay, let's read our next sentence. Ready? The arrow is shorter than the what? What's the arrow shorter than? Because it says the arrow is shorter than, is the arrow shorter than the marker or is the arrow shorter than the hammer? Ooh, it's the hammer, right, boys and girls? So let's put hammer. So what did we compare in that sentence? The arrow is shorter than the hammer. So we compared the arrow and the hammer. We put those two together in a sentence. So what haven't we compared? We haven't compared the marker to the hammer. Ooh, let's compare those. So we can say, therefore, the what is shorter than the what? What's shorter? The marker is shorter than the hammer. Therefore, the marker is shorter than the hammer. Okay. All right, let's try another one of these together, boys and girls. Let's turn the page. And here is our last one together. Okay, it says, our objects that we're comparing are a spatula, a paintbrush, and a tack. And look how they're nicely lined up here. So we're going to compare these sides, how long they are. Ready? So it says the blank is longer than the paintbrush. Okay, let's all underline longer. The blank is longer than the paintbrush. What's longer than the paintbrush? Let's look at the paintbrush. It's here. Is the spatula longer than the paintbrush, or is the tack longer? Ooh, I hope we all are thinking spatula. The spatula is longer than the paintbrush. So what did we just compare? The spatula and the paintbrush. We compared those two. Okay, let's read our next question or sentence. The paintbrush is longer than the what? Ooh. The paintbrush is longer than the what? Here's the paintbrush. Is the paintbrush longer than the spatula, or is the paintbrush longer than the tack? I think it's the tack, right, boys and girls? So what did we just compare? The paintbrush and the tack? So we compared those and those, but we didn't compare these. So we can say, therefore the what is longer than the what, or therefore the blank is longer than the blank. What could we put there? Should we say therefore the spatula is longer than the tack, or therefore the tack is longer than the spatula? It should be therefore the spatula is longer than the tack. Okay, boys and girls, keep practicing these, okay, and have a wonderful day. Bye.